Alright guys, welcome back to another reaction here in Napoleon series. A couple things from my previous reaction I want to talk about here. Um, I had a commenter tell me that I should start with some different videos, I guess the more early battles of Napoleon's career. The Napoleon's first victory, the Siege of Toulon, not 1793. This was brought to my attention by Christian Fagoros 5812. Sorry if I did not pronounce that correctly. But yeah, so I'm gonna go back and react to some of the previous ones before we continue on with the battles, I guess, in when he becomes emperor or after he becomes emperor. So what we're gonna do is do that first, and then we'll go back and keep going where we were. I think he also mentioned that there was some Napoleon in Egypt videos as well. We'll take care of those and then kind of go back to where we were before. So I do apologize for kind of going back and forth. I guess I was not aware of to do these ones first. I kind of was just going based on after Napoleon was crowned emperor, but I guess I should go back and see how we got to that place in time, and the reason why so many people followed him in some of his early battles. Again, don't know much about these, especially 1793, long time ago, before he became emperor, and we kind of know very little, at least I do, about this time in history for him. So again, brought to you by Epic History TV, History March, and I'm guessing Osprey Publishing is where they get some of their books and educational references. So we're going to go do that first, and yeah, see what happens. It was in Toulon that my reputation began. Okay, Napoleon says that. Okay, so this is very important to his history and Napoleon's, I guess, overall career is right here.
In the summer of 1793, the French Revolution was entering its fourth year, and France was on the verge of anarchy. In Paris, political extremists had seized control of the revolution. They guillotined the king and imposed a reign of terror that dealt summary justice to all suspected enemies of the revolution. Hoping to use...
Now, I am familiar with the name Robespierre. I've heard of that before. I've heard of the French Revolution in school. They did talk about it briefly, and how basically, if there was any doubt at all of your loyalties to the revolution, there was a good chance that you would be punished in some way. A lot of times, the guillotine. So I'm a little more familiar with that and Robespierre. I'm not familiar with everybody who is sort of the leader of the revolution at this time. So it'll be interesting to see a little bit of that history too.
Unify the new republic, France's leaders had declared war on the Habsburg Empire. But the conflict quickly widened, and soon France was facing the combined might of Europe's leading powers.
Oh wow.
Determined to stamp out her dangerous political experiment.
Almost everybody.
Meanwhile, whole regions of France had come out in open revolt, horrified by the new extremism of the revolution. In August, the Republic suffered a further, potentially fatal blow when the city of Toulon joined the revolt. Toulon was France's largest and most important naval base in the south, home to a third of the entire French Navy.
Oh.
But now, rebels welcomed their old enemy, the British Royal Navy, into the port.
Wow. That's
led
crazy.
by Admiral Lord Hood, aboard HMS Victory. It was an extraordinary coup. Without a shot being fired, the Allies had crippled French naval power in the Mediterranean and gained a vital toehold on the French coast. All French forces in the area were immediately diverted to face this new threat and lay siege to the rebel port. 19,000 troops in all, But since most French officers had been aristocrats who were now fleeing the revolution in large numbers, they were seriously short of professional leadership.
19,000 troops. That doesn't seem like a lot considering what we saw in the previous videos. So it's very interesting to see all these powers aligned against the revolution. And I guess the revolutionaries, or whatever they're calling themselves, the people who don't want the monarchy, they can only muster 19,000 troops. That doesn't seem like a lot. I guess it says it's Napoleon's first victory, so I'm guessing they were victorious, obviously, but it'll be interesting how that happened, considering it doesn't seem like that many men.
Their commander, General Jean-Francois Carteau, was a loyal Republican, but a court painter by trade with no military training. To make matters worse, one of his few professional officers, his artillery commander, Colonel Martin, had been badly wounded on the approach to Toulon. Antoine Salicetti, a Corsican deputy of the National Convention in Paris, recommended as his replacement a fellow countryman, a 24-year-old artillery officer who was passing Toulon en route to the front, named Napoleone Buonaparte, or Bonaparte.
Gotta start because somebody got injured?
Bonaparte was a professional soldier, but he'd seen almost no active service. Nevertheless, Salicetti was impressed by his manner, and most of all, his politics. Bonaparte had just written a political pamphlet, a short story about a young artillery officer who berates his fellow diners for their disloyalty to the Republic.
Okay.
General Carteau thought it wise to accept Deputy Salicetti's recommendation.
One can remain 24 or, if necessary, 36 hours without eating, but one cannot remain 3 minutes without gunpowder. That is a great quote. I like that a lot. And I suppose in battle, that is so true. I mean, if you're fighting, you're not really thinking about eating. But if you don't have any gunpowder, you're probably really thinking about that. It's like, well, I gotta leave, I guess, if I don't have any gunpowder.
The great port of Toulon was well defended by city walls and a dozen outlying forts and redoubts. They were held by 2,000 British soldiers and sailors, 6,000 Spanish troops, 6,000 Neapolitans, and 800 Sardinians. Artillery would be the key to overcoming these formidable defences. But when Bonaparte was put in command of the artillery on the 16th of September, he found himself with few cannon, not enough trained gun crews, and a shortage of gunpowder and shot. With relentless energy and determination, Bonaparte transformed the situation, requisitioning unused guns, training infantrymen to work them, setting up a new forge and workshop, and arranging transport from Marseille of 100,000 sandbags for constructing new batteries.
That's wild. Like, how much time did they have to do this? I guess it is a siege, so they have more time. But it just seems like the defenders are kind of just waiting to be conquered, in a way. Because Napoleon's just doing whatever he wants. He's setting up, getting requisition supplies. He's training more people on cannon, getting more cannon. And I guess it seems like numbers-wise, too, it's kind of equal. The defenders have the same amount. Although they are from, and maybe that plays a part, they are from like multiple different nationalities. I guess communication would be a little difficult, I would suppose, if you have like 4 or 5 different, ethnicities or nationalities or whatever trying to communicate defense might be a little harder. But that is surprising that he was able to accomplish all this without any like battling going on. He just was able to get down to it and kind of reform the artillery.
Through hard work, he was ultimately able to build his force up to 64 officers and 1,500 men, manning 100 cannon, howitzers, and mortars.
That's wild.
Within days, Bonaparte had established 2 new forward batteries with good revolutionary names, La Montagne and Sans Culottes, which brought Toulon's inner harbour within range.
Wow.
And forced Admiral Hood to move all his ships closer to the port. Bonaparte also came up with a plan, one that would allow the French to bypass most of Toulon's defences and secure the rapid victory the Republic so desperately needed. Bonaparte argued that if Fort L'Aiguillette could be captured, which looked out across the harbour, he could fill it with heavy guns and shell the British and Spanish fleet at anchor.
What?
Admiral Hood would be forced to abandon the port and take with him the Allied soldiers that Toulon relied on for its defence. General Carteau saw the merits of Bonaparte's plan, and on the 22nd of September, French forces attacked Montcaire. But to Bonaparte's exasperation, while he'd argued for an attack by 3,000 men, the indecisive Carteau committed only 400.
Wow.
Not only was the attack easily repulsed, but it alerted the Allies to the danger. Within 48 hours, they'd reinforced Montcaire with thousands more troops and built a new fort named Fort Mulgrave, bristling with 20 cannon. The position was now so strong, the French nicknamed it Little Gibraltar.
It's funny. I like that. There is only one possible plan Bonaparte's, General Dugommier to the Minister of War. Again, like I said before, it's strange that they had so much time to do all this stuff. Is that a weird thing to say? Like, you're just, like, you can see each other, you can see the enemy, and you can see them building fortifications, and they can see you building up your cannon, and nobody's fighting, or doing very little fighting. I guess, I mean, for the British, what can they do other than sit and wait? They're not going to probably launch an attack, but it is, to me, a very strange thing to kind of just have like a, you know, a thought that we both know we're going to fight, but we're not fighting yet. We're going to build up our forces and then we'll fight. And of course the British, like they said, had to, you know, care about their ships, because that's kind of, you know, Britain's strong point is their navy. So if they can't have their navy there for some reason, it's going to be a big loss.
Finally, in mid-November, an experienced professional soldier arrived to take command of French forces, General Dugommier. He saw at once that Bonaparte's plan was the only way to take Toulon, and gave it his full backing. Bonaparte, promoted to major, got to work, overseeing construction of several more batteries in preparation for the decisive assault. One forward battery was so exposed to enemy fire that men refused to be sent there. So Bonaparte renamed it La Batterie des Hommes Sans Peur, the battery of men without fear. And suddenly, there was no shortage of volunteers. It was an early display of Napoleon's genius for inspiring his soldiers, one that would serve him well in the years ahead. On the 30th of November, the Allied Land Forces commander, British General Charles O'Hara, tried to seize back the initiative, leading an assault on the new French batteries facing Fort Malbousquet. At first, the attack was successful. The batteries were overrun, the French guns spiked. But a counterattack with much greater numbers, and led in person by General Dugommier and Major Bonaparte, drove back the Allies.
Wow.
General O'Hara himself was shot through the hand and captured. 12 years before, he'd surrendered to George Washington at Yorktown during the American War of Independence.
Okay, two things. That's wild that he was shot here and then surrendered to Washington. Interesting. I guess I don't know much about O'Hara. I guess I looked that up later. The other thing, though, it's strange to me. The British were dug in, kind of making their defensive perimeter around Toulon, and then they waited until the French had already kind of built up their force to launch an attack. Again, hindsight is what it is, and I'm not a military strategist, but it seems to me like the chance to do that should have been earlier rather than wait until, France had already had some reinforcements coming. They had built some kind of earthworks, they had some fortifications, and then you launch an attack. Maybe he was waiting for more troops. I don't know. The British, I don't know what their plan or their strategy was, I guess, there, but it just seems strange to me that you would wait until Napoleon had already kind of done a lot of upgrading to attack when you should have attacked before that happened, if you were going to attack at all. I mean, there's something to be said of just, I guess, remaining defensive, but very strange.
Now he got to surrender to Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, wild. Among those who most distinguished themselves and who gave me most help in rallying the men and leading them forward were Citizen Bonaparte, commander of the artillery, General Dugommier to the Minister of War. Citizen Bonaparte. That's an interesting title.
In the early hours of the 18th of December, in howling wind and driving rain, the French launched a major assault on Fort Mulgrave. The wet conditions made muskets useless except as clubs or with bayonets.
Wow.
Bonaparte led the second wave in person. Amid fierce hand-to-hand fighting, his horse was killed under him, and he was bayoneted in the thigh by a British sergeant, a wound that came within inches of ending his life.
Wow.
And radically changing the course of history.
I would say so, yeah.
Finally, the Allied garrison was overwhelmed, and Mulgrave fell to the French. Fort L'Aiguillette and Tour de la Balaquière were soon also in French hands. By the following afternoon, the French had 10 heavy guns in L'Aiguillette, placing the Allied ships within range. Admiral Hood could not expose his valuable ships of the line to such a threat. He had no option but to order an immediate evacuation of the fleet and garrison from Toulon.
That's crazy.
Small Spanish and British teams raced to destroy all the French ships and naval stores that they couldn't take with them. But amid the chaos of their departure, 18 ships of the line were allowed to fall back into French hands.
What?
A badly missed opportunity.
Wow.
Many French citizens of Toulon were desperate to escape aboard the Allied ships, knowing that the Republicans would inflict terrible reprisals on the city. British and Spanish ships took as many as they could, about 14,000 in all.
Wow.
But scores were drowned amid chaotic and desperate scenes.
That's horrible.
Others were left to face the wrath of the revolution. Republican troops entered the city the next morning, and executions and firing squads began almost immediately.
What? That's crazy, dude. Okay, first off, the planning was horrible, apparently, because they just, ditched the city and then chaos. They didn't even try to fight. And then all these poor people, I mean, did every single one of these people support or go against the Republic? Or did they just get caught up, even if you're just like a regular person, you had like no political leaning, you were just caught in the crossfire, I guess? That's wild to me.
For the next 2 weeks, about 200 were executed every day.
Oh my gosh.
Allied propaganda later blamed Bonaparte for the atrocities, but there's no evidence he was directly involved.
I doubt he was. I mean, that doesn't seem like... My predictions were exactly fulfilled. Such is the history of this event, which so greatly astonished Europe and has never been well understood.
France's young republic was now fighting back on all fronts. And with the fall of Toulon, the Allies had lost a golden opportunity, a chance to stir up further revolt, deal a lasting blow to French naval power, perhaps even overturn the revolution. But instead, the French Republic had weathered one of its greatest storms, in no small part thanks to the remarkable judgment, energy and courage of one 24-year-old artillery officer.
Wow.
Now promoted Brigadier General in recognition of his extraordinary service at Toulon. Napoleon Bonaparte had taken his first step on the path to greatness.
Yeah.
And for Europe, 21 years of almost constant war awaited.
Crazy.
Our sponsor, Osprey Publishing, has nearly 200 titles on the Napoleonic Wars alone, written by specialist historians and covering everything.
What an episode.
History of
That's
nations
crazy.
to tactics, weapons, and uniforms.
It
Visit their website to find out more.
It's very strange to me, though.
Thanks to all the
So two things that kind of stood out to me in this episode. One, Napoleon is so very young and already seems to have a lot of battlefield knowledge, or at least theoretical knowledge of what to do. It seems like the other generals, who, I don't know how old they were, but they were just kind of like sitting there waiting, and Napoleon comes along like, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get it done. And once they do it, the dominoes kind of fall and the French are successful. But two, it also seemed to like the British and I guess, or whatever you want to call the Allied forces, made it fairly easy for that to happen though as well. They didn't, other than that battle for that fort, they didn't really put much defense in. They kind of just abandoned Toulon, it seems like. Maybe I'm wrong. I understand they were trying to protect their navy, which, makes sense. That's kind of their power. But, like size of army wise, it doesn't seem like they were all that different. So I'm wondering who made the decision or why the decision was made to abandon Toulon like that. I'll probably have to look that up, or if someone can tell me in the comments too. It just seems like it was kind of, they saw that they took that southern area, the French did, and the British were like, well, we can't have our ships in the harbor, so we're just going to leave altogether. Okay. That's an interesting choice. I'd like to know more about why that was made. And then, of course, the poor citizens of the city, I don't know. I'm not going to get involved in like royalists versus republic, politics, but it just seems wild that so many people were executed. And I'm going to guess at least some of them either, some of them probably didn't even have political leanings. They were just, whoever's in charge is whoever's in charge. They just trying to go about their day, making what little money or product that they can make. But what an interesting start to his career that it was kind of by accident. The guy, I don't know, I forgot the name, but he took over for another artillery guy that got injured. And he was just like, Napoleon was just like riding by. He was going somewhere else. And he's like, okay, I'll step in. It is crazy to me that I guess history is full of, moments like this. If you look back of what ifs, and one small things could change everything. So, and then they did say he almost was a bayonet. Yeah, he got bayoneted in the thigh, which you can certainly die if you get stabbed in the thigh or shot. There's a big artery there. So that's crazy. He lived through that, and now he's going to lead France as the eventual emperor eventually. We'll get there, of course. But yeah, great episode. Awesome to learn where it all started. His first kind of major command and victory. I appreciate the comments telling me to go to this one first. I'll continue on with the videos in chronological order, I guess, whatever the next one is after Toulon. And then we'll go from there. And then I think there was an Egypt one too, so I'll do that one as well. All right, guys. Thank you for coming along, and any comments are appreciated if you know anything about this stuff. I always like to learn. And we'll see you in the next video. Peace.